The Indominus Rex is the Jurassic franchise's most well-known hybrid by far. Being so well-known, in fact, that a buddy of mine who worked at a dinosaur museum constantly has to deal with curious paleontologists to be, asking if insert giant theropod here is the Indominus Rex. But sadly, this dinosaur did not exist. Or, well, thankfully. As many of you know who have seen the film, and for some reason if you haven't, then click off this video and go watch it, the Indominus Rex is an absolute menace on Jurassic World. In a single day, she kills an entire fleet of hunters, kills sauropods, ankylosaurs, is able to take on and grapple theropods, and terrorizes parkgoers, needing the combined power of man, Rexy, the Raptor Squad, and the flipping Mosasaur to put her to rest. And she does all this at a young age too, only being a child in human terms. But given her power and viciousness in the film, many argue that the Indominus Rex is the strongest dinosaur in the Jurassic series. Personally, I have Prime Rexy, the Giga, and the Spinosaurus above her. Now, hold on, I can already hear most of your guys' confusion, but there's a good reason. Now, for those who saw my Indom vs D-Rex video, when covering strength, I mentioned the Indom fought a super weak Rexy, possibly if not the weakest version of Rexy seen on screen, having been poorly kept for 22 years, and having lost any muscle she built up years ago. But with that being said, one thing people bring up is that she isn't fully grown, which while yes, a fully grown one would be more dangerous, there's a different and much more important question that should be asked. What if she was in the wild? While yes, a fully grown one would be stronger, she would still likely lose to the Giga and Prime Rexy. So in today's video, we'll be letting her loose on purpose, to see what the Indom could have looked like if she was allowed to go in the wild and touch some grass. Hello everyone, I'm your host Koji Guy, and today we're taking one of the most recognizable dinosaurs in fiction, and showing you what she could have truly been capable of. So grab your hard hat and some chips, and let's take a look at the true Indominus Rex. The Indominus Rex, despite showing great feats on screen, is nowhere near her full potential. Now, most people bring up the argument that she's a fully grown, but you guys are selling her short by a lot. So let's quickly cover, despite how strong she is in our film, why she is so weak in the rest of the Jurassic ranks, and then go in depth on how she could have been. So without any further ado, let's start with why she's so weak. Now, there are many reasons on why the Indominus isn't as strong as some of the other dinosaurs in the Jurassic franchise, and one of her popular arguments is how she performed against Rexy, which at absolute face value with no context, I fully understand. She beat up Rexy more than the Giga, besides the death, of course. So most people would just assume, well, they fought the same person, and one did better than the other, so she must be stronger. But as I say in the last video, Rexy was super nerfed in that film. Between a poor enclosure, no exercise, and not having fought in over 20 years, she wasn't able to hunt or eat when she wanted. Rexy in that film has never been weaker. But then look at the Rexy the Giga fought. She had been free for years now, eats and hunts when she wants, and is able to properly exercise when needed to stay healthy. I.e., if the Indom was tied and occasionally getting overpowered by World Rexy, Dominion Rexy would sweep the floor with her. But here's the thing, everybody always brings up how weak Rexy is, how she hasn't exercised in 22 years and whatnot. But you also need to realize, the Indom has never gotten exercise. If Rexy had it bad, the Indom had it even worse. The Indom was put into a tiny enclosure. She was fed seemingly the same amount of food as Rexy, despite being a larger animal, and had never fought anything, getting no proper exercise before her rampage on the island. Look at Rexy in this film like a 10-year-plus retired boxer. Well, the Indom would be someone who just walked into the boxing ring for their first time with no training. She never got to grow muscle anywhere, and due to her lifestyle, she is much weaker than she could be. For example, her teeth. Dinosaurs replace their teeth all the time. And while they did just do this passively, they would also do it when teeth got knocked out, damaged, or infected. If the Indom could have grown up using her jaw more, and in turn her teeth, they likely wouldn't be as chaotic as they are on screen. Over years and years of use, they would slowly start to become more uniform. Not saying they'd be perfect, as the Deinosuchus DNA is there for a reason, but they would definitely be more organized, and better at clamping down or shredding through prey, or fellow predators in battle. So, to quickly review, she was kept in a tiny enclosure, she was fed frighteningly little food, she had never fought before, she was young and frail, she had never used her claws and teeth in battle, and she had only got to fight for one day before fighting the weakest version of Rexy seen on screen. So with all that out of the way, let's get cooking. Alright, the first thing that needs to change is her environment. The Indom was raised in a small and stressful enclosure, so small that it is likely what caused her to kill her sibling when growing up. So first thing out of the way, tear down those walls and put her into the wild. The baby Indom, like any baby dinosaur, would struggle its first few years. But in this fictional scenario, we can of course help her out by making sure we deter any larger predators, like a fully grown Giga or Carno. The Indom will grow up like any baby theropod, that being hunting on small prey. Whether that be fellow infants like herself, or just smaller dinosaurs is up to her. The first huge difference in the Indom here is that rather than food just being handed to her on a schedule, she will eat what and when she wants to, or at least when she can. This will force her to learn many important hunting skills, such as stalking and ambush tactics. While yes, normal Indom could already do that, this Indom would be far better at it. Growing up in the wild, there would also be some surface level changes to her body, such as her feet. Living in the wild requires stealth. If you can't keep quiet, you won't be able to eat. Growing up in an environment like that would force the Indom to start walking quieter. Rather than her loud stomps in the Jurassic franchise, this Indom would likely refine how she placed her feet when walking, possibly walking more on the pads of her toes rather than the stomping we know her for. Another update would be her tougher skin, especially around the joints like the ankles, wrists, shoulders, and maybe even parts of the belly and chest. These areas are where rocks, rough plates, and chasing prey would forcefully cause it to get stronger, causing her to naturally build thicker, more keratinized skin. And back to her feet, being in the wild her whole life, the bottom of her feet would harden massively, having pads that are almost like rhinos or elephants. Not to mention calluses. Her tendons and ligaments would strengthen throughout her life, helping her grow faster, have deadlier lunges, and allowing her to shake more vigorously when attacking prey or grappling another predator. But simpler stuff aside, how would her muscles grow? Well, as we said, the Indom in the film is pretty weak, and she has never had any way to properly put her strength to the test. Now being the predator that she is, there are a few very specific muscle groups that would likely grow the most, those being her arms, as she would use them in battle, her jaw, and her tail. Let's start with what would happen to her arms as a whole. First, the main muscle groups that would increase in size would be her deltoids, aka her shoulders. This muscle group is responsible for raising and rotation of the arms. The Indom, as you see, is a great grappler and slashes at her prey a lot. So this trait would likely carry over to her new hunting skills. While we'll cover her new hunting tactics later, she would still use her arms as they're a huge advantage over many other theropods her size, as most don't have the arm advantage that she has. Another muscle group that would grow would be her flexor digitorum profundus. Alright, let's be real. People that watch me a lot know that we aren't fancy here. That's more of a Goju Center thing. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that her hand muscles and lower arm would grow quite a bit in size. But to explain these fancy long words in depth, my friend and fellow YouTuber Overseerer will be taking over. So take it away, weird Australian man.
Thank you, Goju Guy. In the wild, the Indominus Rex would heavily rely on her claws, whether in combat, manipulating objects, or possibly even rudimentary tool use. In the film, however, she's truly never challenged to use them. She's regularly fed and lives in a controlled environment, with no need to hunt or interact with the world in a meaningful way. Her claws are only utilized in her battle during her single day of rampage, and even then, much of the damage they inflict comes not from the surgical precision of her claws, but rather the sheer mass and power of the limbs behind them. So building up these muscles would be crucial in her progression, along with her lower arms and her upper arms, aka her triceps brachialis and coracobrachialis muscles. These would be important to allow her to deliver strong blows behind her attacks. But to further support those, her shoulders must grow a significant amount, as they will need to support the new larger and in turn heavier hands and arms. Overall, her hands, arms and shoulders will need to grow a solid amount, which leads us to our next muscle groups. With her upper body growing so much, her tail would naturally have to grow larger to help balance her when running or walking. The muscle group responsible for this? Well, let me try my best to get through all these muscle groups in the tail. The major group that would grow is called the cauda femoralis. This is actually made of several smaller muscle groups, as you can see here, but for the sake of your ears as well as my pronunciation, we are just gonna lump them together and call it one group. This muscle development would not only balance her out, but would also allow her tail to act more as a weapon in battle, now being thick and strong. With all this new development, she will grow in weight quite a bit, so the next thing to cover is her legs. Firstly, as we established earlier, her feet would change quite a bit. With this new size and weight, they would likely grow wider, allowing her to distribute the weight over a greater area. She would start to walk more on her toes to reduce the noise she makes while walking. Along with her feet, her legs would grow in perfect proportion, but the main muscle group that would grow would likely be her thighs, specifically her cauda femoralis, iliotibialis, and femorotibialis. The cauda femoralis is responsible for retracting the legs. They would grow as there is now more force needed to push her heavier body. The iliotibialis is what helps stabilize the legs and helps lift and control its position, while the femorotibialis is what extends the knee, and with these new powerful steps, pouncing or sudden turns now need strong knee extensions. So overall, we have a stronger back, shoulders, arms, hands, tail, feet, and even legs. Now of course, almost every muscle in her body would need to grow in size, as she's now acting like a real animal out in the wild, but we are covering the main noticeable ones. But with that being said, there is one last muscle to cover: her jaw. Unlike the shrink-wrapped face we saw of her in the film, this Indom would fatten up a little. Now using her jaws on a day-to-day basis, whether that being from fights, eating or other things, her jaw would grow quite a bit, giving her a much more devastating bite. So now we move on from her muscles onto her claws and teeth. Now, nothing would likely change too much about her toe claws other than getting larger, as she can't really use them all that much, but her hand claws and teeth is where it gets interesting. Now, as we see in the Jurassic World film, she was locked in her confinement for most of her life, resulting in more theatrical looking claws which were not needed to be utilized at all. I mean, she was spoon-fed chunks of meat, not live prey, which would have required her claws to subdue them. The most we saw of her utilizing her claws within her cage was to scratch up the walls of her enclosure as a distraction. Meanwhile, in a wild ecosystem, she would be utilizing her claws more consistently. This would be for hunting and manipulating objects and prey. Over time, this would lead to significant wear and shortening, minimizing the significant disparity between the length of her claws. These shorter claws would become more robust compared to her film version, and while admittedly they would still be sharp, they would not be in the same blade-like level of her movie depiction. The benefits of having a more equal claw length includes a more balanced grip strength as well as more reliable contact during strikes. Her teeth would also go under similar functional changes. In the film, they appear chaotic in terms of direction, size, and sharpness, perfect for a dinosaur park's monster attraction, but poorly suited for long-term wild survival. In the wild, her teeth would face daily stresses of tearing flesh, clashing with bone, and fighting other dinosaurs. Chipping, cracking, and tooth loss would be a common occurrence, but regular regeneration of these teeth would gradually produce a more consistent and practical bite. Over time, her teeth would still vary, but there would be a greater consistency from repeated wear. They would be more evenly distributed and angled backwards for better grip, now being similar to those of functional theropods. The result would be a bite that's less chaotic and cinematic, but far more efficient and suited for survival. And with that, back to you, Goji Guy.
Alright, thank you Mini Steve Irwin for that. And moving on to her internal workings. First thing that would boost quite a bit would be her gut health. In the Jurassic World films, realistically, if you want to kill the Indom, just give her Taco Bell. Really. She was fed the same thing day after day, and was never let out into the wild. Due to this, her immune system and gut health likely sucked. But now living in the open, eating all sorts of animals, fish, berries, and possibly, if when bored, plants, though she would kind of suck at it. Along with that, living in the wild around new plants, getting mud into any cuts, and getting bitten from other animals, her immune system would strengthen many times over, making her resistant to many types of diseases she may come across. Next would be her stamina. Now, while in the film, she already shows insane stamina. In the wild, it would be even better. Throughout the years, her lungs and heart would grow stronger and become more effective, allowing her to take in more air and pump blood throughout her body easier. Realistically, this is her best trait that'll be boosted, likely being able to run for days on end. But to get even better stamina and focus, she would of course want to try some Gamersupps. Gamersupps recently released their Kaiju line of products, so to any Kaiju fans watching, hold on. With this new release, you can pick up all sorts of products. A Kaiju plushie, Kaiju girl cups, some super comfortable clothing, and some incredible flavors for your drinks that are 0 calories. They've got fruity flavors to tea flavors, and can come in normal versions and a caffeine-free version. If you want to get anything, just check out the first link down below, or go to gamersupps.gg. And make sure to use code GOJIGUY at checkout. And if you get anything before the 23rd, using my code, you'll get free shipping to anywhere. So, check it out. Alright, let's move on. Next would be her hunting skills. Now, in the film, the Indom does show some thought when it comes to hunting, such as lurking in the forest with her camouflage. Though, other than that, she more or less just runs into battle and hopes it works out. So, what would change? Well, growing up and trying to do that, she would quickly learn in the real world that hoping for the best won't get you far, and will likely have a couple close calls throughout her life. Due to that, she'll be forced to start to change. Rather than waiting for a little bit and jumping in, she would learn to stalk her prey for hours on end, following them quietly through the forest. Now, while she could do this during the day, and wait for a clear gap, when she would really shine is when the sun doesn't, night. Thanks to her thermal vision, she has one huge advantage over the other dinosaurs. Now, while we aren't 100% sure they did, it's likely that like most land animals, dinosaurs' body temperature dropped when sleeping, at least by a few degrees. This phenomenon happens for a plethora of reasons, but to keep it short, your temperature drops because your body is conserving energy and entering a rest state. A cooler core helps promote deeper sleep and reduces metabolic demand. So after years of learning this, despite it only being a few degrees, the Indom could reliably attack when she's able to tell that the dinosaur she's hunting is now asleep, allowing her to swoop in and land a killing blow before the other dinosaur is even able to fully get up. But speaking of hunting at night, her senses would grow and flourish when growing up in the wild. Her night vision would get better, and she'd be able to pick up on any tiny movements. She would be able to smell scents from far away, and would be able to hear the tiniest crack of the forest around her. And lastly, her bones. This one doesn't need much explaining, just the fact that she would not be moving constantly, rather than sitting in her enclosure like the film. The Indom throughout her life would grow thicker and more durable bones. That plus the armor she already has, and the calluses that would form on her body, means many dinosaurs would break their teeth when even trying to bite into her. So, she's done. Stronger muscles, a clearer mind, better hunting skills, upgraded teeth, claws, heart, and lungs, and so much more. Now, while her film counterpart likely would lose to the Spino, Giga, and Rexy, I think it's reasonable to say this version would have wiped the floor with them all. And honestly, despite her not being a hybrid, I do see this version of the Indom being able to take on and defeat a good amount of the hybrids entered into the hybrid war here on YouTube. But what do you guys think? But anyways, with all of that aside, what do you all think? Do you think she could sweep the JP verse, or is she still a Rexy victim? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, make sure to subscribe if you want to fill your inbox with more cool videos like this in the future. But I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, keep collecting. Goji Guy, out. See ya.